Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I too would like to echo some of the earlier comments of, first of all, of thanks to our organisers here in Latvia, and also express my appreciation for such a wonderful venue that we have here today. It's most impressive. What I think I will do is invite the speakers one by one. I warn you, I'm one of them myself, so I'll have to moderate myself, which will be an interesting experience. But I think I'll do them one by one and start off with Charlina Vichova. Charlina, I hope will forgive me for saying she's a well-known personality in Brussels. We've known each other for many years. She is a director at the Directorate General for Regional Policy and has a collection of regional responsibilities for that, but is also in charge of the Competence Centre for Smart and Sustainable Growth. So, Charlina, welcome to the podium.
Good morning. In the meantime. Good morning, Riga. Once again, I'm very happy to be back to Riga. In fact, I've been working for Latvia for 6 years, and I continue to work for Latvia, but now on more horizontal level. But at the same time, I have quite recent memories and knowledge of what Latvia has been programming in the area of smart growth as well, because I was also involved in the programming of the partnership agreement and the operational program. So I still feel in double capacity. I'm supposed to set the framework of the smart specialization process with regards to cohesion policy. Let me see first how it works. And of course, I will start as well with the thanks to the Latvian Presidency for bringing up these thematics to their presidency agenda. We consider that an important message for the way we consider the smart specialization strategy at EU level priorities. Indeed, I would like to start with the overall reform that we are trying to implement with regards to the next cohesion policy generation. And you see here on the slide a number of, it's just a reminder because I'm sure that everyone in the room knows about these important strengths that we want to reinforce for the next 7-year, even 6-year period of investment effort through cohesion policy. So for the next period, we want to be much more strategic and result-oriented. We want to see the result of our investment effort in terms of results on the ground, but also overall impact on economy. This greater focus on results is translated in a number of elements. As I've said, one of them is much more reinforced strategic focus, which is very much linked to the smart specialization process, because this is a strategic process, this is a strategic focusing of our investment in the area of smart growth. We also want to be much more concentrated, and this is also part of the smart specialization strategy. In order to have critical mass and to have a real impact on the ground, we really need to concentrate on fewer investment areas. We know that the choices are difficult, but they are needed in order to concentrate where we have our strengths and higher prospects for success. Then reinforced partnership. A reinforced partnership is a novelty from the point of view that we are strengthening it. We have a code of conduct for partnership, and it again links very much to the smart specialization process, which is based on strong partnership between all the relevant stakeholders. Increase synergies. This is also linked with the higher impact that we want to produce, because synergies are the approaches that makes 1 + 1 equaling to 3 instead of 2. So it's a better use of our resources, not only financial, but also our human resources and our energy in investment. To conclude, before I start with the European semester, in order to embed all these strategic strengths through the smart specialization strategy process, we included also in another strand of result orientation, which is ex-ante conditionalities. I'm not going to go into what this concept is, because I'm sure that everybody knows, but in a nutshell, these are the conditions that we are going to watch out that need to be present in order to have an overall success of our investment effort. And some of these conditions should be upfront there in order to embed our investment into the bigger picture. Many of these conditions relate to strategies, because if we don't have a prepared strategy at the front, then we are going to have a random, fragmentary approach with the individual investments. For that sake, in the area of smart specialization, the strategies in this area are elevated to ex-ante conditionality with all the relevant consequences. And the last point you see, we want to embed our the investment hand of the regional policy into the overall process of European semester, which is the European economic governance. And just to make it clearer, you see that the triangle of the European semester, which consists of 3 main elements of focus: fiscal consolidation, of which we hear a lot, structural reforms, and if you see the red one, in which we contribute a lot with our regional policy, growth-enhancing investment. And we have to say that without the 3 elements working to them, on them all together, we cannot succeed, because we can't have fiscal consolidation only. We have to project our investment for the sake of growth. And you see that the growth-enhancing investment, where our policy participates together with the smart specialization as a main delivery tool, you see that it corresponds both ways with the other elements of the triangle, because through cohesion policy, we are aiming at implementing structural reforms, and they are very present as ex-ante conditionalities. But also, we translate our investment effort into building capacity for further structural reforms. With regard to fiscal consolidation, you see the very much disputed macroeconomic conditionality, but at the same time, we work together in order to preserve the growth-enhancing expenditure. Next slide shows the concentration of funding, and this is very much the link, because we have the thematic objectives, and they are the link with the Europe 2020 strategy, which is part of this conference focus as well. So on the smart part, all these thematic objectives, in fact, are our blood link with the Europe 2020 strategy, and are bound, these thematic objectives are bound to structure our efforts into implementing the objectives and headline targets of this strategy. And the first 4 thematic objectives, which are research and development and innovation, building capacity in ICT, competitiveness of SMEs, support, and shift towards low-carbon economy. All these 4 we consider as a part of the smart growth element of EU 2020. The 4th one is also part of the sustainable growth. You see how much money out of the 300 and around 40 billion, or 50 billion, it depends what we include there, for the 7-year investment period. You see that we have 160 billion concentrated in these 4 priorities. And 117 billion ERDF specifically, because 160 billion relates to all the European structural and investment funds. Out of these billions, you've heard that for thematic objective 1, we have around 40 billion. These are still preliminary figures. Mikel talked in his welcome speech on behalf of the Commissioner about the negotiation process. Indeed, I have to underline that here on this slide, I'm talking only on the programming exercise. And the programming exercise is only the start. But still, let's take stock of what we have achieved so far in the negotiation process and how it links with the smart specialization strategies. So out of the 205 growth and jobs programs, we have adopted already 130. The bigger number stands to include also the European territorial cooperation programs. Out of these programs, 110 programs has as applicability the RIS3 or the Regional Innovation Strategies for Smart Specialization. So we see that almost, if we take that 130 are the growth and jobs, so it's really above 80% of the programs relate and have this process applicable to them. However, for more than half of them, so 59 programs, we still need an action plan because the ex-ante conditionality is not considered fully implemented, so it's not fulfilled. Let me remind that the ex-ante conditionalities as a concept introduced, they have to be at the latest implemented by the end of 2016. So these action plans, in order to further implement them, complete the process of programming of smart specialization process, it has to end, the action plan should be with a deadline of end of 2016 at the latest. Then what, in the second bullet point, you see a term called significant prejudice. This is to mean that we are not going to finance any investment for the elements covered by significant prejudice unless the action plan is not fulfilled. Because we have two ways. The action plan can go ahead, but we also can implement projects and support them with our policy at the same time. But in the areas where the implementation of the action plan is so crucial for the effectiveness and efficiency of the investment, we even stop investing from the very start. So the idea is that for the moment, we don't have a significant prejudice for any of these regions or member states where the ex-ante conditionality is still not fulfilled. That is a good sign. That means that the critical elements are really there for these countries. All of them have produced the SWOT analysis, the needs assessment is there. However, you see in the third point the elements that are still not fulfilled, and they relate to the monitoring mechanism. And I would again remind what Mikel said about the evaluation. Indeed, we need to monitor and evaluate the process all the time in order to feed back the results of it into the further implementation. And the budget. Of course, if we don't have well-budgeted smart specialization strategy, then any of the individual investments will not will hang out and will not be able to link with the overall strategic investment if there is no money for the other investments in this strategy. You see the countries, I'm not going to enumerate them, it's for your information. And just to outline what is still remaining in the programming exercise, still we need to adopt the 41 programs. You see the 59 programs that are in carryover. This is the technical term, but just meaning that we are going to adopt them by the end of this month. And the remaining third group operational programs that we hope to adopt by mid this year, these 41, 40 programs still need to be finalized of growth and jobs, and 93 altogether with the ETC programs. So we are well beyond a process of programming exercise, and we have already some critical mass to assess how the smart specialization has been negotiated in our new programs and in the 28 partnership agreements. And I will start with the positive. There, the strengths are more or less evident. We have been successful in shifting the paradigm in the innovation policy design to smart specialization. It is very positive as well that this concept is academically accepted, so we are working all together with the triple or quadruple helix if we involve the civil society. The ex-ante conditionality concept, we see that it really gives clout to the concept, because this is the we always need the stick together with the carrot. So the carrot are the money, and the stick is that the ex-ante conditionality, if not fulfilled, stops the money flowing. And we see that these disciplines the whole process. Then we see that that was a fresh start for the innovation policy in many of the regions, because they looked into their strengths and potentials, and it really boosted the whole thinking on innovation in the regions, all the regions in Europe. Then we also thought quite on the governance issues, and we have achieved a lot. John is going to talk as well on that. I'm not going to go further into the detail. And also we raised the role of the regions as stakeholders in the innovation process, because it is important to bring ownership also into the regions on the innovation process in order to use their potential and to place-based innovation, which is normally territorially blind. And in the end, I have to say that the collaboration between the various stakeholders has been boosted a lot. So it is already a good basis for evolving the culture of innovation linked also to cohesion policy. However, we identified a number of weaknesses. In some regions, we saw that instead of initiating a good thinking process on strategies, there was a bit of a repackaging of old strategies there. Then the entrepreneurial discovery process, that is, as Mikhail said, and I totally agree with him, the DNA of the smart specialization, it was sometimes made formalistically, and in order to link really, especially industry and research, without the entrepreneurial discovery as a full-bodied process, we can't succeed. On the policy mix, what we discovered in the negotiations was that still many member states and regions, they shifted all the time on support to public infrastructures, for example, something that have been supported for very long and didn't produce good results simply because it cannot translate just like this into economic results. So the toolbox is still to be evolved, and we still need to embed the new even soft measures, not always hard investment, into the process in order to succeed. The intervention logic. One of the most important strengths for our policy is a strong result orientation. It is based on intervention logic. For that, we need to know what exactly we want to change on the ground. And this is the start of the process. It is still difficult in some cases to identify the sound intervention logic, but we work together with the member states. And I believe that in the programs that have been adopted, we have a big improvement in that. But it is only the start. Then making hard choices. It was very often the case that the strategy would put together the interests of all the groups without a real vision and catching just the popular strengths, not necessarily the ones that are the strengths of the region or a member state. The multi-level governance was sometimes unclear. It is important to work in a very clear framework, administrative as well, where people know who does what. And the international connectivity, we consider still for the future a very important element to try and bring stakeholders together at the international macro-regional level. The threats for the process. We still consider that in the future we have to try and avoid silo thinking, which will prevent synergies. We have to work on the missing links so that they do not materialize in failures. Like, for example, the demand side is still not well involved in the process. We identify a number of skill gaps. Social innovation is not there. Public sector as such does not innovate quickly, so we have to watch out these threats. The concentration, it's still the case for even some of the adopted, but with action plan smart specialization strategies, where the deepening into the priorities is not good enough, because just biotechnology is not enough. So we need to go further so that we identify in each region what the real strength is to the level of detail necessary. And of course, the matchmaking afterwards with the other regions that have the same broader area, but different sub-levels of concentration and prioritization. After that, this linking is important. Monitoring systems. Again, we don't have culture in that yet. Some countries have, of course, but it's not across regions, it's not across member states. We have to work on that. And the real risk here is that once the ex-ante conditionality is fulfilled, then the motivation might go down. And as Mikhail said, one of the most important phases is now coming, and this is the implementation. A lack of administrative capacity. This is something that we have to work on because it is a key factor to success as well. And the opportunities, my last block, but this is the longest slide. I just to calm down maybe a bit, John. The opportunities we have to tap, of course, the synergy, we have to try and get a maximum out of it. Also, critical mass, which I talked about. We have to explore the best possibilities we have for accumulating critical mass, to work on the whole value chain in transnational cooperation. You see some initiatives that are there helping for that. Burden sharing, we have to be good at that so that we use efficiently our resources. We have to work at EU level also in terms of monitoring to help out also regions and member states. The policy mix, we have the possibility to work together and improve it. Mutual learning, like the conference today, is crucial. And we are there to work together with you on action plans with technical assistance included. Throughout the process, we are going to revise priorities, and this will improve further the smart specialization process. The main challenges, 3 of them, very much on in the lines of what Mikhail said. Keep the ball rolling, meaning the programming exercise is only the first stage. The second stage of implementation is even more important and will test how good we were in the programming exercise. Not by accident, we are saying that the smart specialization is a process and not just a strategy. We have to continue with the entrepreneurial discovery so that the process evolves and is up to date all the time and matches the evolving realities. The implementation tools and capacities, evaluation, as Mikhail said, is crucial there. We have to develop them in order to be able to capture the results of our work. And international cooperation. This is one of the difficult elements in which we have to invest, because mostly regions and member states tend to look into themselves and miss a lot of synergies potential, and benchmarking, they really miss these opportunities from not being enough well connected internationally. And on the right-hand side, just for reference, you see how we link now with the new priorities of the Commission. Again, the investment package of more than 310 billion investment. We contribute also to energy union, digital single market as cohesion policy, but also in the area of innovation. Maximizing synergies and also increased use of financial instruments. So this is just for reference. And this is a reminder, this is my last but one slide, a reminder, just look into this link, because we are going to talk whether all the regions have a place in the smart innovation process, smart specialization process. Indeed, yes. There are various types of regions, and they can all participate on equal footing into the whole process. You can see we have a nice movie created, and the site is there. My last slide is a reminder, because I'm here also to make a bit of publicity of our Regio Stars competition for good projects. And you see that we have smart growth, you see the site on which to apply, and you see the deadline. I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward for a good discussion.
Thank you very much indeed, Charlene. For those of you who haven't seen them, I do warmly recommend the cartoons, actually. That brings us very nicely then to the next presentation. Charlene has left something with sort of some dots at the end referring to Horizon 2020. So this is the perfect moment for introducing the next speaker, who is Dimitri Korpakis. Dimitri is an engineer by training, has spent many years in and around European affairs and European policy making. He's worked on all sorts of things, ICT, education, social sciences, and many others beside. He's head of unit in the Directorate General for Research and Development, and is going to tell us about some of the possible synergies with Horizon 2020. Dimitri, the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here and bring you the message also of my Director General and my Commissioner, Mr. Carlos Moedas, who pays a lot of importance to smart specialization, because we were very much in the beginning of this process together with our colleagues in regional policy. My topic today would be how we can accelerate smart specialization through Horizon 2020. We have heard a lot in the previous presentation about synergies, but I believe the main focus of this session was also to look a little bit on what we do and where we stand with Euro 2020 strategy, and how this is related with our headline targets on Europe 2020. If you just take a look at the latest results of EU 2020 with regard to some of the headline indicators, and I remind you that one of these was to reach by 2020 3% of our union GDP as investment for research and development. You will see that the situation is not really very bright, because on top of this slide you have the target, and then you can see that we are not really moving towards the right direction. And most importantly, if we move on this pace, we will never be able to reach the target on time. So the message, of course, is that we have to accelerate, but of course there is a huge impact of the financial crisis that is still felt a lot across the Union. But nevertheless, it's a little warning, it's a little signal of warning that we have to find new ways to go forward. And smart specialization and the thematic concentration of the structural funds is also a good way to go forward. If you take a closer look to what happens at the level of the member states, here is also interesting to see the red dots on this graph are the particular individual targets of member states. And here again, there are countries that have been closer to the target, but nevertheless, there is a big family of countries that are not really up to their promises. And of course, it's understandable that this situation happens with all the problems that we have met in the Union and in the context of the global crisis. But nevertheless, again, don't forget what we have been listening to the beginning of this morning. Research and innovation investment is also a way to exit the crisis. And I have another graph that I will not show you here that we usually show in these meetings, that the countries that are investing more in research and innovation are better off to exit the crisis faster. So talking about resources and talking about instruments, here comes the promise of Horizon 2020. We started this in the beginning of the new programming period. It's a full part of a core part of the Europe 2020 strategy, and it is our main financial instrument for implementing the Innovation Union policy and the European research area. It's the first framework program that we have conceived as a real tool, as a real financial and economic tool for economic growth. It's not just a new framework program. Actually, it's the first framework program that has a name. It's not the 8th framework program, it's Horizon 2020. So it also gives you the link to that, and it focuses on societal challenges, mainly, on strengthening our capacity to innovate, and it's also the first framework program that integrates research and innovation. We have simplified a lot the framework program. It's actually giving a lot of attention also to frontier research, because we have doubled the European Research Council budget, as you know, and it's also a very simplified framework program compared to the previous ones. We know it's still a complex endeavor to participate, but compared to previous versions, you will find out that it is a very much a simplified exercise. It has 3 particular priorities: excellent science, societal challenges, and industrial leadership. And you will find the links to smart specialization mainly to the societal challenges pillar and to the industrial leadership pillar. Although even the frontier research, the ERC, has now developed a component which is called the proof of concept. And this focuses also very much how you bridge the world between research, innovation, and the real economy. Horizon 2020 is not only focused on the main, I would say, core transnational research project, that it is still at the heart of the strategy. It has evolved a lot, and I would say to a large extent, it has also gone towards partnerships that remind a lot the structural effects of the structural funds, although we are not focusing on cohesion at all anymore, as you know. And this is our also main difference with the structural funds. We focus on competitions and on excellence. Only the best consortia will go through. But nevertheless, there are many other instruments that give the possibility to stakeholders in the member states to go together in public-private partnerships or public-private partnerships. You know very well our new innovation investment package with the second generation of joint technology initiatives, where a lot of money will be invested, again, in the real economy, as we heard this morning. And we also favor a lot of transnational coordination activities like ERANET pluses. So joint, for example, calls from different member states where funding agencies come together on a particular theme, and they are helped, topped up by Commission money. Don't forget also the European innovation partnerships that are not funding instruments, but are more accelerating mechanisms bringing together innovation and research stakeholders with regulators, final users, industry, society, to accelerate innovation in particular fields. And we have several European innovation partnerships. Charlina talked for synergies. I will talk later on synergies too. But here is a particular area where you can find real content to accelerate synergies in all these public-private partnerships and public-public partnerships together. On the other hand, Horizon 2020 has taken a particular interest on accelerating innovative small and medium-sized enterprises. Small and medium-sized enterprises are the core of our economy in Europe. They are more than 95% of the business community in Europe. So we have a number of instruments. We have, first of all, an integrated approach, because 20% of the whole budget of the framework program, in particular societal challenges and the leadership in industrial technologies, will be devoted to small enterprises. Second, we have been simplifying a lot the access to SMEs in the framework program. For example, there are single entry points for SMEs in the member states. We have a new SME instrument, which is a cross-cutting instrument and applies to all areas of the framework program, and for which you have already the first results. And it's a completely new idea, very much inspired by the American Small Business Research Initiative. And already we have 155 new projects starting all over Europe for innovative SMEs. We have also particular activity called Innovation in SMEs, where we take an integrated approach, especially focused to research-intensive SMEs, because, of course, not all small enterprises are research-intensive. And then we have, as you know, a completely new area in the framework program, which is called Access to Risk Finance, which was a much-needed instrument, actually the precursor of the big Juncker package, which we welcome as a real continuation of what we have introduced, first with the risk-sharing finance facility already in the 7th framework program, and now much more with the new program that we have installed with the European Investment Bank, which is also about loans, equity, and venture capital. And this is going also extremely well in this direction. And this can also be combined with the structural fund. The promise of smart specialization is important, and I would like to take a moment to go beyond the operational programs, because the essence of smart specialization is often misconceived in the member states, because it's not another Commission fashionable concept by which we want to torture the planning authorities in the member states. We want really the member states to focus on the real key growth opportunities that will make a difference in the economy. And this is the reason that we have insisted on a real bottom-up entrepreneurial discovery process. And very frequently, you will not find these growth opportunities in the, I would say, the mainstream areas of information and communication technology or biotechnology. You will find this most often in the intersection of these well-known sectors. And this is also where niche areas can be created and give you these growth opportunities. It is actually based on the concept of related variety that preceded the concept of smart specialization years ago, and is also something that you all have to take into account when you design your policy, because this will give you the really rich interconnections between areas, which also will give you the opportunity to jump from one area to the other when things go bad, and it will not lock you into particular areas. So it's not so much about specialization, but it's mostly about smart technological diversification in areas that have a relative strength and potential. And this is also a call for stimulate even more entrepreneurship, modernization of your economy, and adaptation to global needs. So all this doesn't happen by magic. And even if we have shown the video on smart specialization, You need smart governance. So most countries are not really well fit with the new governance requirements that smart specialization needs. So don't hesitate to innovate also in terms of governance, because only when you introduce innovative governance solutions, you will end up with a better implementation of the strategy. And in this strategy, you have to promote a lot interlinkages and spillovers, and most importantly, which is also the message of the framework program, open up to the world, increase your internationalization capacity. So all this, in a context of crisis, leads to the idea of how we can accelerate this change. So we have a lot of tools that you can use to accelerate the take-up of smart specialization, and think about using Horizon 2020 also as a tool for accelerating smart specialization. We have a lot of particularly suited calls to your priorities that you can use to harness your technological choices. You can go for advanced partnerships. Think about the use of all these instruments and public-private partnerships, joint technology initiatives, the new investment package, the ERANETs, the European Innovation Partnerships, and there you can find a rich opportunity for complementarity, because complementarity is the real ingredient for synergies. So when you, for example, you plan particular investments in research infrastructure, think about what you can do with your stakeholders in these particular settings to access Horizon 2020 and accelerate this change. We know that all people are not ready for this jump, and this is where my action on spreading excellence and widening participation, which is an independent pillar of the framework program, part 4, outside the 3 pillars that we showed you, it comes in. So we know that some countries are very slow to perform in the framework program, and also they complain a lot because they are not part of it. So we have created a particular action that will be somehow a bridge between what we call the stairway to excellence. So particular actions for institution building and for bringing excellence to research institutions that are mostly in need. So you know about the actions of teaming. So bringing together institutions, advanced partners with low performing institutions in some particular countries, identified not on cohesion criteria, but on performance criteria. And so there we have the EU13 plus Luxembourg plus Portugal. This is the result of an indicator for excellence that we have used in the latest innovation competitiveness report in the European Union. And last week we have disclosed the first results of our teaming exercise with 31 projects with a total of 14.5 million euro for the next 12 months, which will give way to a second stage where we will pick up the 10 best projects that will be given general support between 80 to 90 million euro for the next 5 years for setting up and functioning of these centers. We're also heading for the results of the European Research Area Chairs next week, which is again an innovative idea for bringing a whole team of excellent researchers to a low-performing institution to step up excellence, but also link it better to the innovation environment of the regions. And as you know, we have also a twinning call which will close in May. So the need for synergies is there because, for a very simple reason, public resources are very scarce. So every single euro counts, and if we are able to combine our action to meaningful objectives, this is the real thing. It's not so much about combining funds for the same project, although you can still do that, but if you do, please beware of the risk of double funding. So the golden rule is use additional work packages for additional actions and do not mix the Horizon Grant Agreement expenses with what you are going to use in the structural funds. But you can actually implement additional activities in the same project, because a project is not only a grant agreement, it's much more than that, and think about also extending this activity on innovation training by the European Social Fund, and also, and most importantly, research infrastructure. And if you put the question, who is actually doing this? Because you have been bombarded with the word synergies right from the start of this session, actually you are in the driving seat. So it's not the Commission. The Commission lays out the conditions for this, but it is the member states, it is the governments, it is the planning authorities, it is the managing authorities, and also research stakeholders, business, institutions, research funding agencies that can design this action, more importantly, inside the operational programs. And I understand there is a lot that needs to still be done. We have not seen so much the word synergy in the new operational programs. We are also working with our Horizon national contact points. We are training them to be more aware of what's going on in the national context. And it is also a plea at the national level to put these people together, because we have also seen the effect of having people working in our national contact points and never getting in touch with people working on the structural funds in the same country. And this has, of course, to stop. There is also the Enterprise Europe network that can be very well used to bring synergies together. And of course, we, from Brussels, we can do a lot, but we cannot do much because also of the distance that separates us from your particular action. But we are together, and I borrowed a phrase from Henry Ford to close this presentation, who says, coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Dimitri. Now, the next speaker you have is me. I shall moderate myself, so I put myself on the clock already. My name is John Benstead-Smith. I'm the director of the IPTS, which is one of the JRC's research institutes. I'll come on to that in a second. When I sat down and discussed with my colleagues what an appropriate presentation would be here, we came up with the title of Research and Innovation Strategies for Smart Specialization, the challenging phase. I'll explain a little bit later on why. But what I'd like to do is just in the next 10 minutes or so tell you a little bit what we do and where we fit in. This is for a purpose other than sort of naked self-publicity. It is also actually to try and convey a message of where I think we can be of use, and then give a few ideas and comments as to where we think we are, having got this far in the process, what we think will be difficult or easy in future. There are elements of commonality with what you will have heard already and what you will hear, but I think it's useful to see from this morning's panel, from a number of different points of view, where we think we've got to. Simply where the JRC is in the Commission. The Commission has 28 commissioners, President Juncker, 27 others, and we have our silos. Right? We have our Directorates General, like everybody has their ministries or their different departments, and like much of the discussion, a lot of the questions are, how do you get these policy areas to work together? Because where you have broken down into particular policy areas for the sake of being able to administer and apply them, then you have to try and break down the barriers again in order to try and get them to work together. We actually work, we the JRC, for a whole range of different policy DGs. I won't go into that now, but within the Commission we now have come under the same Commissioner as the Directorate General for Education, Culture, Youth and Sport. That is largely, I would say, well, I wouldn't say exactly it's an accident, but there's nothing particular to be read into it. Commissioners tend to get accumulations of portfolios. Ours happens to have us and education and culture as well. And we have, we've put his picture in the bottom. Our Director General is Vladimir Sucha, who is a Slovakian. Our mission and role, if you go onto our websites and things, you will find out how we describe ourselves. And we describe our role as being to provide EU policies with independent, evidence-based scientific and technical support through the whole policy cycle. A fairly ambitious title. We don't do it for all policies. We don't actually necessarily do it through the entire cycle, not least because quite a lot of post hoc evaluations tend to be done from outside as well. There are various reasons for that. But we would like to see ourselves as an in-house provider of independent, and we would like to say excellent scientific and policy advice. Moving on then to the smart specialization, this is an activity that we, the JRC, started up in 2011 in the institute that I run. We have a total of 7 institutes, I should say. 3 of them are based in northern Italy, one's in southern Germany, one's in eastern Belgium, one is in northern Netherlands. We are based down in Seville, down in southern Spain. The others are a bit older than we are. They tend to have their origins in natural sciences. Most of them, in fact, all of them are actually on nuclear sites. So they were based in that sort of background 40 years ago. We came somewhat later, 20 years ago or so, when at the time the various political leaders, including Chancellor Kohl, Mitterrand, and President Delors, thought they wanted to have a capacity to look at what sort of socio-economic changes might come with technology changes, to see, for example, whether the internet would ever amount to anything, and if so, if it would change anything for our daily lives. Well, it looks rather fanciful to look back at it now, but 20 years ago, it was not evident that the internet would bring quite what it has brought. So that's where we fit in, and the Smart Specialization Platform is work that we started up with our colleagues in DG Regio in 2011. And the idea is to provide science-based professional advice for the establishment and implementation, more of that later, of smart specialization strategies. We have a collection of policy-making directorates general who are also interested in it. I'll explain more about where they think they fit in and where they potentially fit in future. The numbers that we have, every time one of us makes a presentation, we give a different set of numbers because we have different numbers of member states signed up and different numbers of regions. But we've basically got currently 15 member states signed up, 154 regions, and we've got some non-EU regions as well. We have, in that sense, a sort of a somewhat sort of privileged perspective, both outside the Commission in terms of supporting countries and regions in how to develop and implement strategies. Within the Commission, simply because we're, if you like, at the centre of something that interests a lot of different directorates general. And then within the scientific community, this is an area where, if you like, there is a whole body of scientific and academic discipline that has grown up with it, particularly in recent years in the context of what is, I suppose, popular and most frequently referred to as new economic geography. Those are the main activities of what we have. I will run through them very quickly. We started off the whole process, if you like. One of the first things we did was actually we ended up coming up with a guide. If you haven't read it, I would recommend reading it. I've also referred there to the digital agenda toolbox. Why? Because, as Charlina pointed out, within the structural funds, there are parts which are directed towards things, I'm going to phrase this very carefully, things that ring certain bells in terms of sectoral policies. Let me put it that way. It's not the way they're formulated, but for example, where we run policy in relation to the digital agenda, it is clear that there are areas of structural fund spending that are of interest in those areas, notably in relation to things like infrastructure as well, rolling out broadband, a whole bunch of things like that, where our colleagues there are also interested in seeing how best we can implement the funds available to a European level in order to hit some of those policy targets. So there is a coalescence of a lot of these areas of interest, and we are doing work with them as well in relation to a digital agenda toolbox to help them try and work out how they would hit some of the targets they've tried to set themselves. Transnational learning processes, peer reviews, thematic workshops, I won't say any more, probably many of you here have seen, participated in, maybe even presented in as well, and all sorts of country, macro, regional events and targeted seminars that we've done all around. We've done them in Seville, yes, but we've done them all around Europe as well. The RIS3 assessments support to DG Regio, I'll come on to that in a minute. Interregional collaboration, you've heard a bit about that already. Again, I'll say a bit more in a minute. That is and always has been one of the real sort of challenges in terms of trying to implement these sorts of policy areas at a European level. Synergies between policies, that is something that is becoming, as I say, increasingly apparent. I'll say a little bit more in a minute in relation, for example, to energy policy, where if you look across Europe, there are clear intentions in terms of where you want to go with energy policy. You have things like the strategic energy technology plans. You have all sorts of things in terms of resilience tests now. And one of the questions is, how do you bring these funds together in these different instruments together in order to try and hit some of those targets and reinforce some of those things, which is why, in terms of what we do in this area of work, we have, again, for example, the Directorate General for Energy that is interested in trying to do some specific smart specialization work with us in relation to energy. There's various interactive tools, newsletters, websites, and there's a research agenda as well. I say all of this simply because I want to try and pass a message to you, which is that what we do there, and there is a huge amount of things and results and information available, is genuinely something that we view is a tool that is there, that is for you as much as it is for anybody else. There is a huge amount, I think, that can be gained by seeing what different regions' experiences are, by seeing what different regions' strengths and weaknesses are. You can learn, in my view, every bit as much from each other as you will ever learn from us, dare I say it, possibly even from DG Regio as well, because the whole process of using this as a tool, and I would underline a continuous tool, is something where we think there is enormous sort of added value to be gathered. Here is a slide that you're not supposed to be able to understand. My staff are very keen that I should present this to you. And the reason you're not supposed to understand it is you're not supposed to be able to tell the difference between the different columns and rows, because it's all deliberately too small, so that none of you can recognize who you are and none of you can see what it is we've done. But the simple part of that is, and this is the reason my staff were keen for me to present it, is because they want me to be clearly aware of how much work they think they're doing and how overworked they think they are. That simply reflects the fact in the current process and the recent process, we down in my institute have been busy looking with our colleagues in DG Regio at all the different partnership agreements, about 180 operational programs, and that's just the ones dealing with thematic objective 1. We have huge amounts of sort of iterative consultations and discussions about what's in them. The red ones are the ones that are not the stages and different processes which are not yet approved, and the green ones are the ones that are approved. So bit by bit, everything shifts from being red to green. But you won't find yourself in there, or at least I hope you won't be able to find yourself in there, because you will see that some of them have progressed faster than others. But it has been an extremely intensive phase of work, because after all, this is a relatively new process that everybody's involved in. And therefore, the whole sort of, as Charlina said, iterative process of consultation to try and work out how best to conceive the different programs and agreements has been crucial. The critical issues, I think, of where we got to now, and I will say something which you've already heard, and I'm sure you'll hear from many others, is that we are clearly at a point where we're passing from, if you like, a conceptual phase to something where, as Mikel Landabasu said in his video message, you know, we're getting to the critical stages of implementation and seeing how it actually looks like when you start putting it into operation. I've picked 4 critical issues there. One is the implementation of policy mixes, which is, if you like, another way of saying, yes, we're now getting to the nitty-gritty of how you really implement and what are the right policy mixes, what are the best ways that you can mix the different policy objectives together, and the best way that you can find to implement them. The synergies and coordination, Dimitri, I think, gave a very cogent explanation as to something where I think everybody can see there's a sort of crying need for improving the way some of the synergies work. We all know that, but do we do it? Well, we haven't got as far as we should have done yet. I'll come on to a little bit more of that in future. The next point I would say is monitoring and evaluation. And for us, I think, in terms of the line of work that we're in, we like to try and think that we need to be a bit, if you like, ahead of the curve in terms of what is going to be coming up. This is going to be absolutely critical. And I've no doubt that in another year or two's time, my staff will have a very similar slide to the previous one, but it'll all be about monitoring and evaluation, and quite a lot of it will be read, and we will be intensely working on how we actually improve that, because that will be one of the critical tests of the whole process. And clearly, all of this challenges a lot of our sort of existing setup in terms of national and regional governance. And we shouldn't underestimate the extent to which these can act as something of a sort of deadweight brake upon changing the way we do things. I'm going to have to remind myself the time shortly. Yes. Novelties in the implementation. The governance of integrated policy mixes. I think that goes way beyond R&D policies. We see very clearly that particularly, I mean, if there is one unifying feature, it is, I would say, that post-crisis, almost all sectoral policy areas are looking in a funny sort of way underneath it all for certain similar primary objectives, notably in terms of things like growth and employment. And so to that extent, when they look across our sort of range of instruments, they are all, and our member states are all, and we'd like to think our regions are all interested in seeing how best you can bring them together. Because it is certainly true that they tended to be run somewhat separately in the past. But if you're trying to actually maximize what you get out of these collective investments, then you'd better have a minimum degree, and ideally a maximum degree, of coherence and synergy between them. The path dependency really requires some fairly difficult decisions. You need to be, as was pointed out earlier, prepared to fail as well as succeed, because if you simply follow the previous path dependency, you will continue doing what was done before, and you will get neither a better result nor necessarily a worse result, but you won't actually have changed anything very much at all. I can tell you anecdotally that I remember a couple of years ago when we had some evaluators coming through looking at us and what we did and contributed to research. One of them made a particularly striking comment, which is, he said, I've done a lot of these evaluations, and I'm very skeptical when I come through and I look at it and I see too high a success rate. It means you're not taking enough risks, and all you're doing is backing things that are guaranteed to win that don't need you to back them anyway. But this takes courage, and it takes a certain degree of political and administrative courage as well to be prepared to break down some of those path dependencies. Increasingly interrelated economies, in a sense, I don't think I even need to say anything on that. I think that is such a self-evident truth these days, and if you need the evidence, just look around you over the last 5 years or so, look at the headlines of the papers now. This seems to be something where I think it is clear. 20 years ago, plenty of people would have said, well, the European Union is composed of an economy of the regions rather than member states. It was to some extent considered sometimes a slightly bold statement in those days, but I think it would be much more widely accepted now, and the economic interdependence of the different regions of Europe and indeed beyond Europe, I think are very powerful. So simply, if you add those things together, it seems to me very clear that you need a strategic policy management as well. Moving on, since my moderator is telling me that I need to get a move on. Just something very briefly, 2 things to illustrate what Dimitri was saying. The funding distribution of framework programs. I mean, this is a space-blind policy, and you look at that, well, that's not a space-blind result. And in a sense, one of the things you need to think about is, and this is why we, for example, have got involved in a project that was initiated, in fact, by the European Parliament, the so-called Stairway to Excellence, which some of you will have heard of, which is to get away from something where there is, if you take it at its most cynical, a perception that, well, okay, the framework program tends to be used by the most competitive, the most economically advanced member states, and the regional funds are for the rest of them. And there's a sort of, almost a compensatory mechanism between the two, Clearly, what you need to get to is something, whereas Dimitri, I think, pointed out very well, you need to actually get the two to work together. And one of the things that you need to do is to work out how it is you get all of the member states participating, certainly on a much more even basis, in framework program projects. And one of the things that we're doing with the Stairway to Excellence is to try and see what it is that is holding back some of the member states from participating to the same extent as others. This is basically the same thing, but just with some numbers attached to it. You can see what the breakdown is of Framework Programme 7 contributions received. You can see the older member states still account for about 85% or so, and the newer member states relatively small. Those figures, somewhat depressingly, have not changed an enormous amount, and one of the things that you need to think about when you look at it in the context of regional and cohesion funds as well is what you can bring about in order to change that particular graphic. Collaboration across borders. This is something that is a difficult challenge, but when it works, has often in the past brought enormous rewards and benefits, but it is not a thing that member states and indeed regions necessarily find easy to do because there are quite a lot of natural instincts to spend money, particularly in your own territory. But I think you certainly need, I've put down there an alignment of roadmaps. You can call it an alignment, you can call it a certain degree of coherence and compatibility, because there is certainly something to be said for having European, national and regional innovation roadmaps that at the very least fit together reasonably well, so that you at least have the basic conditions there to optimize some of the cooperation. Similarly, in relation to the synergies and co-investment opportunities, I've mentioned the Stairway to Excellence already. I won't go into further detail on some of those things. As I've mentioned already, there are some that relate to common themes. I've mentioned energy, ICT, but there are others too. And indeed, in some of Charlina's presentation, you could see just from the intervention of different parts of the structural funds, what some of those elements are. And finally, we have various macroeconomic regional strategies. Some of you will be familiar with, for example, the Danube strategy. These are clearly areas where you need cooperation. And indeed, if you look at something like a Danube strategy, a cooperation between regions and member states down the Danube actually predates the existence of the European communities and then the European Union. So the necessity and the requirement is there. The real question is, how do you set about addressing it? I will finish in a couple of minutes, just simply to say, we are now entering a phase where the whole question of the steady and consistent monitoring and evaluation is going to be crucial. I phrase it that way simply because this is just it's not something where you do phase one, which is you come up with, a program and you finally get it approved and you think, oh, thank God for that, right? And then you've done it and nothing happens, or you implement something, but you don't actually use it. And you don't use, dare I say it, something like the Smart Specialization Platform as a tool to try and keep a fairly steady check and monitoring of, is it still clear what we were trying to do? Are we still at least on track to try and get there? That is an absolute essential ingredient, because otherwise you get to the end of it and you say, well, no, I've just remembered that's what we said we were going to try and do, and this is where we've ended up. You need to use these things on a continuous basis. And so I think in terms of monitoring, and as I say, when we've looked at the programs, this is something that I think everybody is conscious needs to be really strengthened in a lot of the intervention logic. You need to inform about the development and effects of the transformation processes. You need, in other words, you need to really see what it is actually delivering, and you shouldn't just be waiting right to the end before you see that. You need to condense and clarify the intervention logic. In a sense, almost the simpler you make it, the easier it is to get there. Because if you really stick to a few very simple key principles, then you will have a much better idea of where you're trying to go. If you make them too complicated, it's all too easy to think you're on the road to getting there without actually being on the road to getting there. And finally, stakeholder engagement and the promotion of trust building. If you've developed and you've gone to the trouble, as we have, of developing a process which, including entrepreneurial discovery, means that you are trying to bind in people at all sorts of different levels into it, then you better make sure that you bind them into the whole process of monitoring and evaluation as well, rather than discovering at the end when you've finished it all that actually they're not at all happy with what you've done because they changed their mind after the first year, but you never took account of it and you never listened to it and you weren't aware of it. So all those areas there in relation to monitoring evaluation are going to be major activities, I think, for all of us in the coming years, and I think they're going to be crucial to the success of the whole process. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. I will stay up here to introduce our next speaker, who is Silke Turnshoff, who is from the Committee of the Regions. She's an economist who has studied almost everywhere, if I look at her, CV, and has been in the Committee of the Regions for the last 10 years or so, and is a head of unit, and is currently responsible for 2 of the 6 commissions of the Committee of the Regions, for social policy, education, employment, research and culture, and for citizenship, governance, institutional and external affairs. So, okay, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for inviting the Committee of the Regions here to this important conference. I feel very honored to be here, and it's actually the first time for me to be here in Latvia, so it's a great opportunity. I will focus on a different strand of the plenary session this morning, and on the EU 2020 midterm review and the lessons learned. But allow me first to introduce you with a couple of words the Committee of the Regions. The Committee of the Regions is the political assembly of the European Union, which represents local and regional authorities. Our core, let's say our core business is actually to prepare opinions on legislative and non-legislative act of the EU. And we have 350 members from all member states who work in 28 national delegations. And in fact, as we stand, our new mandate today will start today, and we will elect a new president. And since I don't have a confirmation, I will not disclose the name, but I'm pretty sure that the one who will be the president is very familiar with many of you and has a very keen eye on the topic, on the priorities of this conference today. So the raison d'etre, the reasoning for having a Committee of the Regions, you see that here depicted. I will not read that out, but just to remind you that 70% of the EU laws are implemented on the local and regional level. We are trying to do our share in bringing Europe closer to its citizens, and I think there's still a way to go. And we provide a meeting place for regions and cities in Brussels. In fact, we have 16,000 visitors a year. We organize 200 conferences. We host 120. So we have about 20,000 stakeholders coming into our premises and working with us. These are the policy fields we are working on in the 6 commissions, which were mentioned before. And apart from that, we are also working on the field of external relations with countries outside of the EU in various joint consultative committees, working groups, and in a parliamentary assembly, one on the Eastern Partnership, the other one on the Euro-Mediterranean, always on local and regional issues. We are, and now I'm coming closer to the subject of the session, we are monitoring a number of cross-sector priorities and look at or develop medium and long-term political options. One is the EU 2020 strategy, another one is our so-called subsidiarity network, which monitors the application of the subsidiarity principle. And we are working very intensively on the European grouping of territorial cooperation. Apart from that, we are running workshops together with DET Enlargement in a so-called local administration facility, where we are bringing politicians from enlargement countries to Brussels and provide a way for an exchange of good practices with local and regional politicians from the EU, with administration from the EU, on a number of issues regarding the EU acquis. We are monitoring the division of powers within the EU and the enlargement countries. I would like to encourage you to look up specifically this monitoring activity, because it is quite interesting. I think we are providing a wealth of information with regard to that subject. And coming to the subject of today, more specifically, the EU 2020 monitoring platform we are running. We have 180 cities and regions from all member countries. And we look at the partnership and multi-level governance implementation within the European semester. We have done, and I'll come to that a little bit later, an assessment of a midterm assessment of the Europe 2020 strategy, and have done an online consultation with more than 1,000 respondents. We've done surveys on each of the flagship initiatives. And specifically, I'll mention some results of surveys on the execution of the EU budget and public investments, growth, and national co-financing. The Europe 2020 strategy, where do we stand? Many of these points you see here on the slides are actually from the Regional Investment Scoreboard, the latest edition. We can see, and I'm sure you all know, the progress is mixed with regard to the headline targets. We are off course, and Dimitri mentioned that already, for the R&D target, but the good side is that most member states increased the level of public and private investment. One of the findings of the Regional Investment Scoreboard, one of the very important findings, I think, is that the regional innovation systems are directly related and dependent on the national systems. In fact, all regional innovation leaders were located in only 8 member states. We have seen that innovation performance differences between regions tend to become larger, not smaller, but average performance has been improving over time. The geographic innovation divide persists, and the regional innovation paradoxon also persists as well. As I said, we have asked through our network and through our members we've organized a survey regarding the EU 2020 midterm review, and these results are just a glimpse of the general view the respondents have expressed. We asked them with regard to the importance the EU 2020 strategy had for their priority setting, and we asked them if the strategy has led to an improvement of their regional and local priority setting. And we could see, and you see that on the upper left pie chart, that 57% of the respondents either fully or substantially agreed. So there was a positive effect in their view. Then, with regard to needs, and again, this is just a glimpse of the whole study, of the whole survey, we asked if the respondents would deem a further territorial differentiation of the strategy useful, and there we could see an overwhelming majority of 77% on the right, upper right side, the pie chart, which found that there should be more differentiation, that, for example, the headline target, the national headline target, should be territorial, should be broken down, and either regions should develop their specific contribution, for example, full headline regional targets, or they could engage, or they should develop a qualitative path to change within this strategy. Then, when asked about the setting of targets and what would be needed, participants highlighted very much that there should be attention should be paid to the importance of cross-border interdependence. You see that on the lower right side, the chart. 87% of the respondents said yes, there should be, for example, commuter flows, cross-border economic cooperation, and the concentration of clusters with cross-border agreement should be integrated in the development of targets. And last but not least, and not such a positive result, when asked about the impact of the EU 2020 strategy on the increased use of innovative financing tools, the respondents were very critical, and they said that, 51%, that they didn't agree at all, or agreed to a limited extent, that that the EU 2020 strategy had led them to use more innovative funding tools. Building on these surveys, on the consultation, we developed a political declaration, the so-called Athens Declaration, which then was translated into a very practical blueprint for a renewed 2020 strategy from a territorial perspective, from the perspective of the regions and cities, which we published last year. And of course, we did last year our annual monitoring report, which looked at the implementation of the EU 2020 strategy on the subnational level over the past 12 months. I would like to mention shortly two aspects which came out of two other consultations we did. One is a consultation we did on public investments, growth, and the national co-financing of the ESIF. And there, specifically, when asked about the obstacles to secure the participation of private investment in project, respondents highlighted that first, insufficient incentives for private investment in project, then of course the economic outlook, we're not yet out of the crisis, and then I think that's very important and links up to some of the points previous speakers made. A lack of administrative capacity in their respective regions was perceived as an obstacle for private investment. And next point, stemming from a consultation on the execution of the EU budget, we saw that regarding the impact of the new regulations governing the European structural and investment funds, respondents saw to a large majority an improvement for their absorption capacity. And when asked about the impact, if the new ESIF regulations would facilitate the coordination of the ESIF with centrally managed EU funds such as Horizon 2020. There were mixed answers, as you can see here. 44% confirmed and 40% declined that this would be the case. Again, these are just very short glimpses on the general surveys we did. Looking ahead, how can the EU 2020 strategy be improved, be carried forward, be adapted to the needs? Again, this is a territorial view. This is the view of cities and regions who have participated in our activities, view of our members. And one very important point is that there should be a territorial differentiated approach. The flagship initiatives should be a lever to enhance policy coordination at all levels and between different EU policies. New flagship initiatives should be launched on key challenges, such as, for example, could be administrative capacity, and a territorial impact assessment of flagship initiatives should be required. Then funding for long-term investment should be mobilized, and an effective coordination between horizontal and vertical coordination between public budget should be ensured. And last but not least, a point which was very important in all our surveys and in all position papers, innovative approaches for the delivery of public services should be encouraged. This is also a point which came up in the speech before. Proposals such as public sector innovation laboratories, which could be set up to offer strategic guidance, or the development, for example, of an interactive web tool ranking the performance of EU regions in each of the EU 2020 indicators was one of the proposals which was made. Looking at the complementarity between regional, national, and EU policies and instruments, there was a request for multi-level governance to ensure effective delivery of the country's goals for growth and jobs, an online repository of good practices in innovation solution, and mutual learning schemes, mentoring, and secondment. And one of the points which was made was that one could think of, for example, a code of conduct on the EU 2020, which would then incorporate some of these principles. The Committee of the Regions has developed a handbook, this blueprint I mentioned already. We have developed a handbook for local and regional authorities and on the EU's 2020 strategy, and we will revise it with the new strategy, with the new proposals. And I would very much like to encourage you to have a look at the work we are doing with regard to the EU 2020 platform, and of course, as well, all the other activities. If you have any questions, these are the contact details. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Some very interesting results, I thought, in some of those questions. Our next speaker is Ann-Kirsti Farvik, who is the Executive Director of the Division for Innovation of the Research Council of Norway. She has been there for close to 10 years. She's a pharmacologist and has worked as a senior researcher and indeed as a manager in industry in Norway and the US, and indeed has experience as the CEO of a biosensor startup company. So, Ann-Kirsti, over to you.
Minister, State Secretary, ladies and gentlemen, I think this will be a different type of talk. I will use the next 10 minutes or so to take you through some of the thinking we have in Norway when it comes to smart specialization, show you some of the instruments and some of the processes. Norway is not a European Union member state, but a full member of Horizon 2020. Norway is, though, a partner with EU through the agreement of the European Economic Area, EEA, also covering research areas. The Norwegian research and innovation profile and priorities set the agenda for the Research Council of Norway and also, of course, the other key players on the national arena. Smart specialization strategies, strictly defined, have not been part of our toolbox, but we have long-time experience of somewhat similar processes and instruments for targeted research and innovation effort that I will briefly present. Some Norwegian regions have, though, been using the smart specialization toolbox, and this will be presented in a separate talk later during this conference. Dedicated national research and innovation instruments for regional development have been in operation for the last years, and these have been important for the regional smart specialization process and implementation. The EEA and Norway grant's primary objective is to strengthen bilateral relations. The allocation to research cooperation has led to an increase in our cooperation with partners from the new EU member states. All projects have Norwegian participation, but are led from Latvia, Estonia, Poland, Romania, and the Czech Republic. The calls reflect national priorities, but is open for researchers to identify the good and relevant partners. The calls have been met with very high interest, and the success rate is far below 10%. The projects have several objectives, including strengthen capacity and build competence, prepare the participation for the framework programs, and contribute to the development of ERA. The requirements and rules of these programs are harmonized with the framework program requirements. When it comes to the Norwegian national programs run by the Research Council of Norway, alignment with Horizon 2020 and plans for how to qualify and how to mobilize to Horizon 2020 is mandatory. So let's have a closer look to where we come from when we talk about small specialization on Norwegian. Norway is a proud but not heavily populated country, but a country with a very strong economy. The high GDP relates strongly to our oil and gas resources, and so do the fact that Norway is relatively well known to be an investor of size. The government has high ambitions for public research and development investments and has set up the 3% goal for 2030. The orders for Horizon 2020 are also tall, being 2%, and represented a significant increase from Norway's FP7 performance. The industrial profile of Norway is the profile of a nation with a long coastal line and huge ocean areas, and the one of a nation with being rich on petroleum, renewable energy, and biomarine resources. We sell a lot of fish, wild and farmed, oil and gas. We have a lot of hydropower, and shipping are among our strong sectors. So being small, wealthy, and with a solid industry profile might lead you to think that we are among the innovation leaders? Well, a rather moderate innovator is Norway, according to this Innovation Union scoreboard. You find us down there at place number 17. How comes? It's a long story and it's too complicated to go into details here, but some few comments can be made. We have a very raw material-based industry sector. We have a very high GDP and a low R&D investment as percent of GDP, and we lack large high-tech industry. The innovation experts have been puzzled about Norway and talked about Norway as the odd guy out. Because we have high GDP, high employment, good productivity, good living conditions, but still being a moderate innovator. Our research system has good quality and capacity and is described as being open and attractive. However, innovation activities at the university must improve, the R&D intensity of the business sector must increase, and we can do much better when it comes to IPR. The Norwegian research policy, being the white paper as well as the new long-term plan for research and higher education, addresses these challenges. Science, societal challenges, and innovation, both in private and public sector, are given priority in the white paper, and even more concrete direction and numbers are given in the new long-term plan. The long-term plan might also be looked upon as being a kind of a smart specialization plan on a national level. The Research Council of Norway is an advisor to the government, but also a key instrument for implementing policies. There are 15 different ministries investing in the council, and the council operates all disciplines, basic and applied science, national priorities, and innovation activities. I would like to highlight some smart specialization relevant instrument, and also at the end of my talk present a Norwegian method we have developed that might also have some smart specialization relevance. First, our center schemes. Our centers received solid financing over an 8-year period, and the financing goes to the best groups and the best innovation consortia. We have centers of excellence with top quality science in the academia is financed, and this is a bottom-up process. We have centers for research-based innovation, and here strong consortia of very high quality academia groups and industry work together. This is also a bottom-up process. And then we have centers for environmental friendly energy. We both focus on technology and social sciences with and without industrial participation, and this is a more top-down approach. The centers are very attractive for the best scientists and the innovative industry, and the centers have strong effects on quality, capacity, and on the innovation system as such. Our strategic programs are set up according to national priorities and are to deliver on quality, capacity, and innovation as well, but on a more project-based way than the centers. The strategic programs are set up for 10 years with a relatively high yearly budget between 0.15 and 0.5 million euro per year. Enabling technologies, oil and gas, climate, renewable energy, fish farming. Talent recruitment, building a solid science base, innovation and international cooperation are important elements of these institution-neutral, project-based programs. The third instrument of some smart specialization relevance I want to show to you is an industrial cluster program that we run together with 2 other innovation bodies in Norway. The program is recently redesigned and now has 3 steps, all focusing on innovation in context, a place-based approach. At the highest level, we have currently 2 regional clusters, a strong oil cluster and a strong maritime cluster, both with global positions. Now I will introduce you to a Norwegian methodology we have called the 21 strategies. These are national research and innovation strategies for the 21st century. And these are strategies in areas of high industrial importance and or area where we see grand challenges. We had 21 strategies for oil and gas, for renewable, for climate, for the maritime sector, the marine sector, and we have even more. Why have these 21 methodology gained high popularity among the key players in the Norwegian research and innovation system? Well, the strategy processes have been politically rooted but not politically driven. The processes have been open and including and then taken into account the facts and figures, the players, the setting, and the culture in each and every sector. And the strategies have made a difference and led to changes in structure, in direction, in financing, in culture, in cooperation, and even more. Not all of them the same way, and not all in a very radical way, but difference have been made for key players. So let me end up by showing two examples of 21 strategies. One in an area of top industrial priority, and one in an area with high complexity and with increasing public budgets. The first one is OG21, Oil and Gas in the 21st Century. This is the mother of all the Norwegian 21 strategies. And it was first put in operation in 2001 when there was a real scenario of facing peak oil and a quick and a steep decline of the Norwegian oil and gas activities. This strategy is supported by a strong sector ministry. It has very specific priorities. It is supported by a mix of instruments, strategic programs, technology and social sciences, various center schemes, and demo activities. And there is also a strong emphasis on international collaboration within this strategy. And here we talk about international collaboration mainly beyond Europe. We talk about working with other oil and gas nations. So what is the result of this more than 10 years with OG21? Well, this has led to a more robust and internationally oriented sector. It has led to excellent science, to very valuable innovations, and to extremely well-functioning research and innovation system for the oil and gas sector as such. And then the new one, Health and Care 21. With a vision of knowledge, innovation, and business development for better public health. This has been a very constructive process where we have been able to bring in new institutions and players and also put some of the old players into a new setting. The implementation is in progress and players have already started to act, something we from the research councils can see every day. We see new type of projects popping up, we see new partnership, we see cross-discipline activities, we see very interesting public-private partnerships, and so on. The health and care sector is an intensive research and innovation area in Norway already, and it's not expected that the government will ramp up the financing to this sector significantly now. However, action is likely to be taken to improve infrastructure for clinical studies, to open up for better use for health registers and biobanks, and to urge for more innovation, both in public and private sector. I think I end my talk here. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. Our last speaker will also give a presentation from the point of view of a practitioner, if I can put it that way. It is Agrita Kiopa, who has substantial international experience in science and higher education. She's been a researcher at the University of Liverpool, Georgia Institute of Technology, University of Illinois, and she has been one of the central people responsible here for the smart specialization process here in Latvia. So, over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I would say that my job here today is to share with you our experience, and let me tell you, it has been success. And success in what way? We definitely have not developed a strategy that is desk developed. We worked it out together with the industry, together with the research community, together with other line ministries, and I must also say in very close cooperation with European Commission. So I wonder where the slides are. So, well, anyways. Yes, here we are. Awesome. Let me go one back now. All right. Back slide doesn't go. But I'll tell you what the outline of my presentation today is. First of all, I'm going to talk a couple of words about the RIS3 challenge for modest innovators, such as ourselves. Uh-oh. So next, the outcomes of whole RIS3 process, which we have been living through a couple last years. And also about the next steps, which for us are the implementation and monitoring. So the RIS3 challenge, as we put it, we've seen this slide already. When we put ourselves in a context of Europe 2020 and the target of 3%, what do we see? We are at the tail end of the distribution. We are the modest innovators. We are aiming high. We are aiming for us high at 1.5%. And we currently are investing about 0.6%. So what do we know about regions like ours? First of all, regions are large in numbers. We are regions that are lower in prosperity. We have higher industry specialization here already. And we have higher local embeddedness. So that means we are less connected than other regions. And we also have small market potential. As opposed to those regions that are fewer, that are bigger, that benefit from agglomeration, benefit from the exchange between the firms, universities, and benefit from very diverse landscape, ecosystem of players, and this they can really think of their specialization. So, as we picked up this challenge, for us, the first question was to understand what is the real internal logic of the smart specialization. And here, we built upon the work that has been done before us. And we also were aware that higher levels of entrepreneurship and innovation are observed exactly in those regions that are at the core. That is, in cities that are more larger and more densely populated, that regions that are sectorially very diverse, in regions that are less dominated by small number of large firms, in regions with large numbers of internationally engaged multinational companies, and in regions with large market potential. So, nothing like us. We also know, as a fact, by now, that adaptation and application of ICTs across the wide range of industries has actually exacerbated the differences between regions that are at the core and regions like ours. And then we have this challenge: how do we understand in a right way that suits us how to apply the concept of smart specialization, which seems to be, and which conceptually is actually favoring the core regions. And here the answer is given for us already by the policy community, also at the Commission level. The potential economic gains can be achieved from small incremental improvements across the range of non-core regions, and also a range of technologies that are not frontier technologies. And here come the two basic questions given by the authors of initial concept of smart specialization. Should policy spread public R&D investments thinly across several frontier technology fields? Or should policy concentrate on public R&D investment in programs that create future domestic capabilities and inter-regional and international competitive advantage? So I guess at the moment when this question was put out, the answer was clear yes for the second one and clear no for the first one. In our case, though, the situation is more complicated. We are a small region, we are at the tail end of the distribution, but at the same time, we have our historical strengths in a number of frontier technologies, and we have been we proved that we do have those pockets of excellence we also can build upon. Therefore, for us, the answer has been that we have to treat the RIS3, the Smart Specialization Strategy development, as a process and to devise a hybrid strategy which build upon the existing capacities and expand those capacities into domains of traditional industry, and also does what the second question posed: develop those future capacities. Therefore, the activities that we foresee under our RIS3 strategy aim at the development of sufficiently diverse knowledge base, which is a key for our competitiveness. If we want to achieve any kind of future domestic capability, the diverse knowledge base is probably the starting point for us. And maintaining that diverse knowledge base that we already have. Second, we have to target the whole innovation cycle, and we have to have an innovation system which removes obstacles for innovation and also helps to develop it in a productive way. We understand that probably in Europe, where the whole innovation system thinking has already moved forward, this may look a little bit backwards look, but we are still concerned with our innovation system as such and institutions, and so we put therefore the institution building also in our strategy. So what are the outcomes? First of all, our smart specialization strategy is built upon our industrial policy. It was in place before we started. Second, it is built upon a thorough and honest assessment of our existing knowledge base, of our resources, of our S&T human capital, as well as the innovation system as such and institutions. We did international evaluation of research institutes. We did rounds and rounds of discussions. The first round of discussions identified potential specialization areas, and that round was carried out mainly by the research community. After research community came up with their ideas about the frontier research where we are strong in, the second round was conducted. And that second round was already with industry, and we validated those fields with industry, and we also came up with changes. The specialization evolved. It was no longer the same as it started from. After the second round, after the whole strategy itself was devised and was adapted, we did a third round in which we focused on specific areas and discussed what of the prior investments have worked and what have not worked in the light of a respective specialization area. This round brought us through whole last year when we were programming the investments of the next period in a broad sense. And now we are at the beginning of the fourth round of discussions, which we will use to prioritize the investment programs as well as to devise the instruments. So we have not stopped this process, and we have been working with our counterparts along the way. So that brings us to the third outcome of this process. In our case, it is unprecedented collaboration and coordination between line ministries. This may seem as a natural way of doing things, but it actually requires quite an effort on a daily basis and quite a communication at the level of policy officers, at the level of policymakers, of those people who actually organize the discussions, who put together the strategies, who prepare the meetings, and who prepare the presentations and conversations with and for politicians. So I shall say also that in our case, probably, that we also have unprecedented support and engagement with industry organizations as well as support at the political level. We had multiple hearings at the Parliament, and we have had a Strategic Innovation Council established at the Prime Minister's level and run by the Prime Minister, who could find a space in her busy schedule to meet on almost a monthly basis with us. So our strategy, I will not repeat the fields and areas, but probably will point at some of the linkages here. First of all, as we built upon the industrial policy, our strategy is directed towards economic transformation, towards higher added value and higher productivity. Therefore, we outline directions of this transformation, we set the priorities, and within those priorities, when it comes to the knowledge base, that is where we are talking about the specialization. That is where we are talking about ensuring that the diverse knowledge base is created in those particular areas. And then upon that knowledge base, our firms can build their competitive advantage. So I mentioned earlier that we've been, as practitioners, we've been treating RIS3 as a process. So it allowed us to identify subfields of science which have greatest potential to boost our competitiveness and to ensure the co-creation of knowledge and S&T human capital. What we mean by that, it is real joint working between the researchers and industries in the respective field. And also, it allowed us and provided us a platform for coordination and discussions, because it really, for us, has been an unprecedented way of bringing together on a regular basis all the involved parties. Here, among the outcomes, I would love to share one of the examples that we have. One of our areas, as we defined, is an area of advanced materials technologies and engineering systems. subfields of science within this area are, as everybody would imagine, natural sciences, engineering and technology, physical sciences, mathematics, chemical sciences, chemical engineering, materials, and etc. We do have several competitive industry organizations. To name the few would be Groglas, Sidrabe, Zilait. Main research institutes in this field would be University of Latvia with its institutes. It would be also Institute of Solid State of Physics and Riga Technical Universities. And several others, of course. And here, in this field, we also have very good examples of connectedness, and we've been congratulating recently the Institute of Solid States of Physics for their success of putting together the project of Center of Advanced Materials Research and Technology transferred, which is already second round of this excellence center, and this has had a very high score at the recent teaming action. So we are hoping that all those players and all prior investments and future investments in this field, in this particular subfield, and this domain of development will allow us to attain our goals. So this is a busy slide, but this is just an illustrate another point of what we call our success. What you see here is a map of all instruments, all programs that are related to smart specialization. At the top, and that is cut a little bit off, is the Horizon 2020. We see it as an international source, which is a little bit out there, but then the rest is national. At the left-hand side, you see all in blue, you see all the programs of Ministry of Education and Science. Those are related to research and development, and those are related to higher education. Then you see in the middle and in the right-hand side, those are tools of Ministry of Economy and other line ministries, in which there is support for industries, support for different types of activities, others beyond the research and development, but all of those activities, one way or another way, are related and contribute to the attainment of our goals as we defined in terms of economic transformation. And as you can see at the bottom, we put the education, which includes not only higher education, but also the primary and middle level. So by this, what we did for ourselves, we really mapped conceptually, and we also created this or probably that would be too far saying that we already created that synergy of thinking between different players involved at the planning level, at the ministerial level. But we started that process. People assessed what they are doing in terms of this strategy, of this approach, of putting the economic transformation and development forwards as the aim and really concerting all the efforts to that direction. So again, as I've emphasized, and I think I couldn't emphasize it less, this discussion platform that we managed to create, I think is one of the very important outcomes. As we started with identification of several frontier technology fields, assessed them, evaluated them with them, validated them with industry, and also complemented them with other fields, then we moved through those structured discussions, and now we are at the current stage where we are starting off talking and thinking in terms of implementation and monitoring. And again, we see that it is really non-trivial tasks for us in terms of prioritization, of getting all the agencies involved, agencies matching their targets and their internal doings towards this aim, and also creation of real well-functioning monitoring system. This has been our recent discussion, and this has been what we've been busy with the beginning of this year, besides the presidency. So just to conclude, not to conclude, but to finish the presentation, here's a little glimpse in our monitoring system. Here in a table, there are our big targets. And as you can see, those are the simple macro level ones. Investment in R&D increased to 1.5%, fully understanding that it is not just a percent that changes, but it is a structure of economy that changes there. And also the same for our target to move from the modest innovators to moderate. We understand that for us it is an ambitious target, and we put our monitoring system in a frame of the European Innovation Union scoreboard, where we see all the indicators that build upon that one total composite indicator. What is important here, we are unfolding those indicators at the program level and looking whether we are changing all of the indicators we are targeting here, but even probably more importantly, we are complementing these indicators with our own, those that we have to monitor at different levels. So in this, I could say we have picked up the challenge of tracking the discovery, and let me share with you that for us, at times it was challenging to understand what that discovery process means in terms of whether it is discovery that we are doing while we are discovering the potential fields and potential niches of excellence that could be for our country, or it is at the daily level of daily workings of firms when they are discovering their potential competitiveness niches. So I think it's somewhat both, but that's definitely a challenge, and we are definitely well prepared of picking it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. How much time do we have for questions and answers? Sorry? 15 minutes. Oh, longer than I was thinking. Very good. Right. We have some microphones here. You have some microphones there. In 15 minutes, the more concise and targeted and brief your questions, the more we can fit in. So if you could formulate them as precisely as you can, and indeed, if you have specific members of the panel you would like to address them to, then do please say so. I think the first one I saw two down here. Yes, I saw one at the end here and one a bit behind, and I've got another one here after. So let me take them in groups of sort of 2 or 3. The first was yes, the gentleman there, and then the lady in front. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Jānis Tavolnieks. I am a representative of Enterprise Europe network in Latvia. So on my question, practically for all speakers mention the term or word governance. We talk about governance of smart specialization strategy, etc., etc. Then the next step is we coming to governance of system, research system, innovation system. My question is, what is the difference between governance of research system and innovation system? Maybe it is the same, and could anybody give nice example of best practice of any European country where this governance, a term mainly in terms of maybe DG research and innovation, is on the best way. Thank you very much.
I'm going to take 2 or 3 questions together. The lady in front, just down there.
I have a question and a comment from IARTO, the European Association of Research and Technology Organizations based in Brussels. We're representing 350 research and technology organizations, which are non-profit research providers of applied research, mainly. So my first comment is on what Mr. Hogstad said, but I don't think he's here anymore. Basically to involve the right stakeholders. He said it twice, and I think this is very important. I think the European Commission, GRC, are doing a great job, and national authorities as well. But I think that more effort should be given in involving the right stakeholders to collaborate with regions, so to foster this dialogue. And I think that research technology, and that's why I'm here today, is to really express the interest of research and technology organizations to be helping these regions to define specialization strategies. They are working with SMEs very much, so I think that they're also good at helping the regions with knowledge transfer and this type of activities. So I think the dialogue between the stakeholders and the regions should be strengthened, and the European Commission should foster that. And maybe into a question, what is the European Commission views on that, fostering the dialogue between the different stakeholders in the regions? And the second point is on synergies between the structural funds and the European funds and national funds in general. I think that IARTO welcomes very much this concept. I think it's a brilliant concept, but we have to be careful not to use synergies as the ultimate goal of Horizon 2020 projects or her structural funds project. And by that I mean that the synergies should be looked at in more of a sequential way. Let's say one research infrastructure was first used to be set up by the structural funds and then used for Horizon 2020. So it's a sequential way and not a project level. I don't know if that's clear for the, yeah, so what are the views of the European Commission in this sense, if they agree with this point of view? And once again, thank you very much for this really good conference. I think it's a good occasion to put all the stakeholders together, and I found the speech very interesting. Thank you very much.
Question down here.
Vid Baldaus, Photonica Research Association. Question relates to, well, I would agree with the video message. There is a crisis in Europe and there's a crisis in Latvia in research. We don't have enough researchers, and I didn't hear any reference to that as being a point to monitor. But we're about 15% of the number of researchers that were present here in this country in 1990. And we're trying to build something. We're trying to increase the percentage of R&D spending and so forth and so on. But if we don't have the researchers, we can't get there. We have one ERC grant holder. We probably need at least 10, 20 to really be in the game. So our strategy is to increase the number of ERC grant holders. And what is our strategy to increase the number of researchers in Latvia in the next 5 years?
Right, over to the panel. I thought quite a lot of those were for you, actually, Charlie. Governance, stakeholders, synergies, and the number of researchers.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for the questions. Now, on the governance system, I didn't quite understand what type of difference you were trying to clarify. The governance of innovation system, and what was the other one? I really didn't get it quite well.
Both. The question is...
Smart specialization, you mean?
No.
Governance
in all, even in Horizon 2020,
yes.
We are talking about research, we are talking about innovation. In my mind, it's not the same, yeah? Not the two words are, yeah? And then we should govern a research system, we should govern innovation system. And my question, is it the same body, it is the same, I don't know, regulations or whatever, how to do that, yeah? Or it is one institution, let's say Ministry of Education and Science, they're governing everything, yeah? Or there should be some part of the Ministry of Economy, some special agencies, like in Sweden, for example, or in Finland, Tekes, or we know in Sweden. That's the question. What is the best practice? Since this smart specialization strategy is it is absolutely in line with research and innovation. and how to govern it, yeah?
Yeah, indeed. In fact, we don't have any rules that are established for fixed systems of governance. This is really for each member state and region to decide according to the specific system, local system, how to govern research and innovation. For our smart specialization process, we need the minimum elements that will bring together the stakeholders. And research stakeholders are a type of stakeholders that we have to bring in the system. Innovation as well. So we need to bring these stakeholders into an overall system of coordination. Let's put it like this. Governance is coordination, joint policy thinking, coordinated implementation, synergy bringing between the various instruments that are applicable to these stakeholders. So, in fact, it is the interface and who does what and how the communication is established. And this is very much matching the local context. So we don't have an established rule, but it has to be done locally, either in the member state or in the region. In the meantime, we have EU level of coordination instruments, and there we can help. But I just wanted to say something that relates also to this big division that, of Europe into regions, and it's a persisting divide between regions that are lagging behind and regions that are in the front positions. One of the real differences there is administrative capacity, and administrative capacity is part of the governance system. So I think that we need to establish a path towards the excellence in administrative and governance terms. And we have to think about technical assistance maybe at the level of the European Commission, and we are very open to do that. Another question was involving the right stakeholders and fostering the dialogue. Indeed, we think that one of the key to success is to involve everyone in the quadruple helix, because we are now talking about also civil society involvement. That was part of the idea of the smart specialization process, where we wanted to start from the dialogue between the stakeholders. So it is in the nitty-gritty of the whole smart specialization process. I heard, and it is really very nice from the Latvian side, that they consider as one of the most important outcomes the unprecedented coordination between the ministries. Indeed, we noticed how much needed that was when we started the whole programming exercise. So the smart specialization brings this dialogue and brings this enhanced interface between the stakeholders. However, I haven't heard, unfortunately, anything about the macro-regional approach. So I would very much encourage, I'm sure it's there for the Latvian colleagues, but I very much encourage that they project themselves internationally. The Baltic Sea region strategy is one of the most advanced and embedding the potential into the macro region and across Europe level. It is really important. And the Commission is there to help with the EU level.
I think, and I think the dialogue should also not only be within the region, but with stakeholders, it's also outside the regions. I think that the exchange of best practices should be done. The stronger regions can also help the weaker regions, etc.
Yes, so indeed. This is what I meant, that I missed from the presentation from the Latvian side, the projection outside their own establishment, how to say. And in the S3 platform, we have the start of a matching exercise with mapping out of the potentials as seen through the various strategies on a map of Europe, and there we can bring stakeholders across regions and across macro regions even to work together on the basis of this mapping exercise. But this is to come. So we are working on that thematically and regionally. Then there was, about the synergies. I'm sure that Dimitri and John are going to talk about that as well. Indeed, it is not easy. Indeed, there is a specific focus for Horizon 2020, and there is a specific much more in the applied research and innovation focus for the structural funds. I would not say that there is a simple sequential link. It is important to bring strategies together at the design phase in order to have the framework where to put the individual investments. So for Horizon 2020 and the structural funds, there should be one strategical framework. Then at project level, you can have various ways of combining. There are some good examples for that. We have designed, it's from June last year, a guide that gives more clarification and ideas of how to combine specifically Horizon 2020 and the structural funds. Don't limit yourself into only the obvious, eventually sequential coordination and complementarity. Not enough researchers. Yeah, that was the last question. We have, with the European Social Fund, quite successful schemes related to the support of researchers. So you shouldn't consider only the European Regional Development Fund, but also the European Social Fund. For the European Regional Development Fund, we are a bit more focused on infrastructure and productive investment. On human capital type of issues, you have to look into good examples and good practices of using the European Social Fund. Of course, we have to be very careful because it is not the idea to support researchers as such. It has to be linked to the change that we want to achieve on the ground. And just increasing the number of researchers is not the exact change that we want to pursue. So we have to embed this element that you mentioned into the overall strategy of what we want to achieve. So just increasing the researchers is not good enough. So we have to go further into what you want to target. So I will stop here.
Dimitri, you have, I think, the last word. I can see we're getting slightly anxious about lunch.
Yeah, I will be very brief, especially because the question that you put on governance is extremely challenging. And the answer to this, of course, it cannot be that we can point to some models that you can actually all copy, because this doesn't exist, and you should never do this. Because national innovation systems have their own particular profile. They are entirely linked with the, I would say, socio-economic, historical evolution of every country and region. But what is also important is to observe some of the successful systems, to identify some of the core principles that they look upon. So, for example, one core principle is that you have to have an open dialogue across different layers of government, so that information is flowing, and then there is a good interaction across all levels. Because what we have seen in most successful countries is that they're actually looking into safeguarding this principle of open dialogue and information flowing across all levels of principles. And then, of course, you have to identify mechanisms to transform this into action. And there comes the mechanisms for evaluation and monitoring. The principal message that you heard today about smart specialization, monitoring, implementation when it comes to transform the strategy to action, is that you have to have a real effective corrective and evaluation mechanism that will monitor what goes in, get feedback from the ground, and then come up with corrective action. There are numerous countries in the world and the regions that we could point to as successful implementers. For example, if you are looking for successful models for cluster development, you should go to Austria. I mean, for me, it's a personal view. Austria is one of the best examples for cluster development and cluster governance. And I have seen, I was impressed several times by many Spanish regions. For example, you go to the Basque Country, you will find impressive results in terms of preparatory actions, working groups, work between universities, industry, triple helix, quadruple helix models, extremely important, fundamental for bringing anything efficiently. A word on synergies, I would like to point out to the EARTO remark, of course it's not the ultimate objective for the framework program. However, we have been talking so much about synergies that we now want something concrete to happen. And I can tell you that we are now preparing even more concrete steps inside the House to bring this into fruition. And you will listen very soon to very concrete things. But the important thing about synergies is, again, at the level of the stakeholders. So when we are listening to all these important operational programs, these operational programs have to work hand in hand with I would say, the European level competitions that will harness particular aspects of this. I gave the example in my talk that you could accelerate take-up of smart specialization because you could identify your priorities and then try to see what you can do better on an international scale using particular areas of Horizon 2020. It's not the silver bullet to go forward, but nevertheless, it's an additional point that you can take forward. I think, John, I will stop here.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop with that. I'm sure some of you have got other questions. I encourage you to ask them either by buttonholing the panelists during lunch or in the parallel sessions this afternoon, or we may even have some time possibly at the end of the day. But I'd just like to close by saying lunch is outside now. It's immediately out there. You can't go wrong. And I'd just like to thank the panelists for their presentations today. Thank you very much indeed.